What's happening, everybody? It's Troy here. Welcome back to my channel, guys. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited to bring to you guys a Leca and self-watering video. One of my viewers requested this, so here is your video. Sorry it is a little bit late. I was waiting for an orchid with new root growth so I could do a repot demonstration. Before we get into the video, guys, full disclaimer, I apologize. My neighbors are putting up a new structure in their backyard. It is taking them days to get it accomplished. So we are going to have a slight volume inconvenience, but I have my mic on, so hopefully that will help. I apologize. And before we get into the video, if I could get you all to maybe like, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell, that'd be super helpful to me. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And let's get into this video. All right, guys. So this is going to be my take on Leca and self-watering. Real quick, before we get into that video, I would like to start with why I decided to start working with Leca and self-watering. So about a year ago in January 2024, I started switching my collection that was in a full moss setup over to lava rock and other inert material, and I was really enjoying it. However, I had some things like Miltoniopsis and Oncidiums that I was kind of reluctant to switch over to lava rock because of the moisture retention. So I decided to branch out and try another new media in September of 2024. So 1 year ago this month, I started working with Leca Pebbles. Obviously, I like it if I'm still working with it, and now I'm making a video to share with you all. So why do I like it? I like it for aeration, its drainage, and moisture retention, but it does come with a learning curve. So I'm going to tell you some little tricks that I have learned and some observations that I have made in the past year. Hopefully that will help you either decide to grow your orchids in Leca, or maybe just start with one, or maybe not even start with an orchid and try a house plant. That is actually how I started transitioning some of my plants into Leca and self-watering. I started with an African violet, and then that way I could get the feel for working with the media and seeing how the roots were going to take into the pot, kind of give me an idea of how long it would take for these pots to dry out. So, with that said, real quick, Leca is a lightweight expanded clay aggregate. It is man-made. It is made from refined clay that they fire in a kiln. However, there are two types of Leca. There is Leca for growing orchids and other houseplants, and then there is a Leca that they use on construction sites. And this is infused with a paraffin. Okay, so you don't want to be using that because that's the same chemicals they're using to make gasoline and petroleum. So we don't want that in our Leca. That is not beneficial to helping us grow orchids. I cannot speak for other brands of Leca. I have chosen to use Hydrogen by Mother Earth. This is the original. It is made in Germany. This stuff has been around since the 80s. All right. Um, I know that the other ones will float as opposed to sink because they can't get any, they're not as porous. They can't fill themselves with anything else because they've already been infused with this paraffin, okay? So this, however, will sink because what you're going to want to do when you first get your leca in is you're going to want to clean it. And how I do that is I rinse it off really, really well. You can do it outside with a hose, or you can do it inside at your sink. If you do have older plumbing, or you live in an apartment complex, maybe you just want to go outside with a garden hose and not do it in your sink. However, all I do is I rinse it at my sink and then I boil it for 30 minutes. All right, and then I soak my leca in RO water. So after I finish rinsing it and then I boil it, I rinse it again, and then I soak it for a minimum of 24 hours before I use that. And why I do that is because this is very porous material and it will suck up all of that water content, all the moisture, and it will lose buoyancy. So it will not float, and it will do exactly what I want it to do in the pot for growing orchids. If you notice that you have soaked your leca and it is still floating, you have the construction kind, and I recommend that you don't pot your orchids into that leca. However, if you are using the correct leca and you've washed it and you have soaked it and you are ready to go, you are going to need a few things. So the first thing you're going to need is a pot designed for self-watering, or you can also use pots that you make yourself. So you need an inner pot and an outer pot. Your inner pot, your catch pot, or your mask, however you want to put it. You're also going to need a wick to wake up your moisture. I just pull it up a little bit, and then I will, of course, place an inch of leca around the bottom of this pot. And then that way, when they sit together, I have created a reservoir. This is a fancy pot, and it has a reservoir meter on the back, so that way you can see how empty or full your pot may be. And then you're going to need an orchid, and you're going to want that orchid to be an active root growth. So there were some nice older roots on here, but they're not going to last long after you start transitioning. They're not water roots. They're used to a wet dry cycle. So you're going to end up losing those roots anyway. So I just cut them off, and then that way they're not breaking down in my pot and I don't have the buildup of bacteria or fungus. So what I do when I'm potting into leca and self-watering, normally you'd want to use the next size up for your pot. But for zygopetalums, they like to dry out a little bit quicker. So for my zygos, I choose not to go up to the next size. So I'll just keep this in a 4-inch pot. I'm just putting enough in to cover up where that wick is. And this is a nice barrier between your orchid roots and the reservoir, so you're not sitting orchid roots directly into water. And then this zygo, its back bulbs are not producing any more growth. So when I put it in, I'm going to put this up against the back of the pot and angle this towards the middle, so I have room for growth. So if this was an oncidium, I'd probably go up one more pot size just because they don't need to grow out, or excuse me, they don't need to dry out as quickly as a zygo does. And you're thinking, if a zygo needs to dry quickly, why are you putting it in the leca and self-watering? Well, because we can adjust our watering to match what the orchid needs. And that's something that took me a minute to figure out. And actually, in the very beginning, I keep my pots a little bit on the drier side to get roots to form in there. And then I increase my humidity as we go, so it's not such a shock. And I always put my orchid down lower in the pot because we can pull up the orchid and position it where we want later. All right, almost done, and then I'll come over and show you guys where I have everything. You can also, the nice thing about leca is it's not organic, it doesn't break down. So your back bulbs, you can cover them down in the pot. They won't rot, I promise. I have other orchids that are exactly like this. Apologize again for the noise level out here, guys. I don't know what they're building over there, but they're taking forever. This actually went in very smoothly. This is one of the orchids that I got from Gia. I've already repotted the other ones, and I wanted to get this one into leca and self-watering, and I wanted to use it as a demonstration to show you guys, because I had somebody ask about leca and self-watering. You can see, there you guys have it. And so what I like to do after I get these guys into the Leca and self-watering is I like to go ahead and flush it with pure RO water. And then next week, what I'll start doing is when I make up my nutrient solution for everybody else, I'll pull it through the pot. And then I actually will not leave any in this reservoir. So I'll just pour water through the pot and let those roots get used to the Leca as it's growing, it will require, so right now it's an active growth, it will require more moisture than when it's not actively growing. So a lot of times these reservoirs, I don't keep any moisture in there. I don't keep them full or anything like that. And I let them completely dry out. And what I do is I'll use my microfiber cloth as an indicator as to how damp this pot is up here. So if these are dry or almost dry to the touch, then I'll go ahead and water it. If they're damp like they are right now, like you can just tell by the touch, then I will skip watering and put it back on the shelf. I usually can go every other week in my Leca and self-watering setups, but I'm going to tell you some things to be mindful of. One, you're going to want to use a really good quality water like reverse osmosis or rainwater. This is an example that I have from earlier this year. This is a Zygopetalum maculata, had no roots. A lot of times I'll cut off the older roots and just let them develop new roots. So these are all new roots. It was an active root growth when I got it. Let's see, February. So in February I did this. It was an active root growth. I transitioned it with just a couple of the front roots and it has done well for me. Right now is a good time for me to start leaving more moisture in the reservoir because I have an active growth. And so that's usually the time that you'll want to up your water and you'll want to up your nutrients. But we're in the fall, so I've actually slowed my nutrients down for the fall. But you can see there is some residual from over the summer from my high feed, and so what I'd recommend for that is to flush. There's also though another thing that I did that I want to tell you guys about because when I was growing in moss, I used to use garden lime and it comes in the little pebbles. If you break that up really fine in between your fingers and sprinkle just a little bit over the moss, it's great. It's a little extra calcium and magnesium through the growth season. However, if you are using lava rock or leca, I recommend that you do not use the garden lime as it will literally just hold on to your leca for dear life, leaving this awful residual effect. So this white stuff right here, it, some of it, yeah, it probably is from having high feed over the summer, but a lot of that is from using garden lime. So yeah, that will suck right up into your leca, and it is a nightmare to try to flush that out. So what I've been doing is I have been flushing before I put more nutrient solution into my pots for my orchids that have been in leca and self-watering a little bit longer because most of them have this top layer with from the garden lime where it all just absorbed in and hung on for dear life. Another thing is I love to shower my orchids to keep pests off of them, and so I'll put them in the shower and then my city water will leak into my inert media and it is so porous. It just gets this calcified layer on top. So that's another reason why if you're growing in lava rock or leca or anything like that, you're going to need reverse osmosis water. You're going to need rainwater, distilled water, some sort of pure water with very low minerals and salts. Otherwise, you are going to get buildup throughout your pots and it can kill your roots. So that is just food for thought. Other people have talked about a dry top layer, and so when I first started putting things into Leca, I would pull my microfiber cloth all the way up. You don't need to do that. Just do it at the bottom like I just showed you. The bottom inch is fine. It will wick water up. when the leca is moist and is touching other leca, it'll absorb that. So there is some moisture at the top. You just can't feel it that well, and that's why it seems like it's dry. Also, we want to put our roots down into the pot. So if it's drier up here and more moist down here, they're going to grow down into the pot, and that's what we want. Um, what else was I going to tell you all? I think that's pretty much it. Watch your watering. You can very easily overwater and leca and self-watering. Like I said, a lot of times I'm growing indoors, guys. So a lot of times my orchids don't need that extra in the reservoir. And if I do fill up the reservoir, it's only about halfway. Um, I do tend to keep these guys on the drier side, and then as their roots get more in tune with the leca, I can increase the humidity, but that's going to be orchid by orchid case depending because some of my orchids drink like it's going out of style, and others they don't use the extra that I put in the reservoir. So you're gonna have to experiment. There is a learning curve. I am going on my first year, so I just finished my first year, so I'm going on my second year now of growing in leca and self-watering. I'm still learning a lot. I feel like I'm more in tune now with watering my orchids than I ever have been before. So there's a bonus to it. You get to know your orchids really, really well as you start paying attention to things like that. I also want to show you an example. So this orchid I got 424. So this came in the mail and it was like a full-size Miltoniopsis, but it got an orange rot. I'm assuming that some moisture got down in one of the leaf bracts or something like that, and it got orange rot. So when I received it, there was just a little bit of the orchid that I could save, so I went ahead and cut it. And I was trying to get roots on this forever and could not. In lava rock, surprisingly, I know. But then I switched it over to Leca and self-watering 425. So in April of this year, I put it in this self-watering setup, and now I have new roots. And this orchid is very thirsty. I usually actually, yeah, she has water in her reservoir. Um, she just drinks and drinks and drinks. I don't know if it's because she went so long without roots and she's thirsty, trying to make up for it. But this orchid does really, really well for me in lava rock, or excuse me, in leca and self-watering. And she doesn't like to dry out as much as my zygopetalums do. And I have a couple of oncidiums that like to dry out thoroughly. And then others, as soon as their microfiber cloth starts getting a little bit dry to the touch, that's when they want to be watered. So you will have to get in tune with that. If you're growing indoors, especially, if you're growing outdoors, you know, I feel like you go through a lot more water. Like the orchids that I grow for my customers in the greenhouse behind me, I water that significantly more than my orchids that are living inside. So watch your watering. Don't overwater. Yes, it is very possible. And then what's it I got? Use really good water. And there is evaporative cooling. So let's hit that real quick. So what the evaporated cooling is anything that's wet is cooler. And so at night, when there's no sunlight and everything's evaporating off for the night, it cools your leca. So whatever your leca is, that's what temperature your water is going to be. So it's usually just a couple of degrees. Let's say it's 59 degrees in my downstairs grow space. It'll be like 57 degrees inside this pot. So it's just a couple of degrees difference. And where I'm growing indoors, that's really not a big issue. But if you were outdoors, that could definitely play into it. And also, Leca has frost stability. So this is supposed to be anti-frost resistant, but for most of us, we grow warm growing orchids, so we would never know if that is true or not. Um, but that's just an extra added bonus and something to be mindful of if you are growing outdoors. For me, that works wonderful, the evaporated cooling, because I have a lot of Miltoniopsis in this setup and they like it to be cooler. So it actually works out to their favor and benefits them. But that is my take on Leca and self-watering, guys. That's the repot. If you guys want to hold on a second, I can bring out all the orchids I just got from Gia. I just repotted. Normally I don't do it so quickly, but when we're going into the fall, I just want to get everyone repotted into my media, switched over, and then that way I don't have to worry about learning how to water in a media that I've never worked with before. Um, and everybody had active root growth or actively growing roots, putting new roots out. So I didn't feel unsure about doing it. I felt comfortable doing it. If you're ever uncomfortable with something, like how I just cut off all of the old roots on my zygopetalum, maybe you're unsure whether or not to do that. So my suggestion would be to leave it. I personally cut them off because I feel comfortable doing it because I had all those nice roots in the front of the plant. I got rid of all those roots in the back. Um, and then that way I don't have to worry about anything growing inside of my pot. That's why I did it. But I am comfortable with that. When I first started growing in this media, I was not comfortable with that. And that is not something I would have done in the beginning. You're going to make mistakes, and they're not mistakes though, guys. It's experience. You're going to have those moments where you didn't have the experience, you did something and got a result you didn't like, and now you'll never do it again. But you have the experience you didn't have before, and I promise you're going to get more in tune with your orchids. And for the most part, I have successes. You know, this is a success. Getting roots after a year, and I have multiple all around this pot. And this didn't come from the lava rock. This came from Leca and self-watering. I think Miltoniopsis do great in this setup. So you're going to have to play around with it a little bit and figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. If you are using this setup and having great results, let me know down below. If you have any questions, let me know down below. And a great resource if you guys are going into Leca and self-watering and you want more information from somebody who has over 30 years of experience growing orchids in Leca, go check out my mentor, Ninja Orchids, and I'll put her information down below. So that way you can have more videos with more knowledge and better your decision if this is the route you want to go. So hang on real quick. I'll bring my orchids that I got out from Gia and let you guys see their new setups, and let me know if you guys have any questions. And these are the orchids from Gia. I just went ahead and transitioned them either into lava rock or they're in a Leca. This one is in my small grade lava rock setup, or they're in Leca and self-watering. This is the bulbophyllum daisy chain. I usually have good success with bulbos and Leca and self-watering. Not always, but typically I do. They like to drink a lot. They're very thirsty. And then this is the Rosellii. This poor thing got smushed in her pot, so she was the first one to get a repot, but she had nice new roots coming in. So I went ahead and took advantage of that. But yeah, that's what I have from Gia. This is the rescue Cattleya over there. She's got the couple of roots there, so I'm hoping that now they are in Leca, they get that extra little silica boost and they take off. But that is what I have for you all. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. You all take care and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, guys.